Hello, everyone, and welcome to Navigating OCD, the podcast where we discuss all things OCD, the recovery journey, and more. Today, you can see I'm joined by the lovely Megan, and Megan is here today to discuss her OCD recovery journey. And Megan, I looked back at what you'd originally wrote to me, and I think so many people are going to relate to what parts of your story I know already. I can relate to what parts of your story, what little I already know. And yeah, I wanted to start by thanking you for opening up, because it's not easy to talk about OCD. It is hard. But I think, the more we all open up, the more people feel like they're not alone. So yeah, thank you. Do you want to start by maybe telling listeners a little bit about yourself and maybe a little bit about how your OCD or mental health journey began?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm Megan, I'm 25.
Mm-hmm.
And I first kind of developed symptoms of OCD when I was 7. So my parents separated, and I noticed now it was OCD, but at the time I was referred to a psychotherapist for anxiety.
Right, yeah.
And it kind of started with a fear of my mum, something happening to her after my dad left. I was convinced something bad would happen to her.
Mm-hmm.
And I began doing like these compulsions, these rituals to prevent it from happening. Really, random things that didn't relate, like having to step on the door frame. A certain part of my foot had to touch it. And I had to lean my foot back and forward, and looking through the crack in the door and kind of going back and forth. And I felt like if I did that, my mum would be safe. Nothing happened to her. She's not going to die. She's not going to get hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, the therapist I saw, because I saw quite a few over the years through CAMS, they said it's kind of like, trauma from parents splitting up. It's some anxiety. And then really, really shortly after that, so it come on quite quickly from that to this fear of choking.
Yeah.
I don't really know exactly where it came from, but I had all of a sudden, this lump feeling in my throat constantly. And my diet become restricted to just liquids.
Wow.
I just having soup, tea. I couldn't eat solid food. And I was only, 7 or 8 at the time. So really, so it had quite a bad impact on me physically.
Yeah.
And as the years kind of went on, that's the type of OCD that has come back for me always.
Yeah. So is that, would you say, maybe your main theme that you struggle with?
Yeah, I would say that's my main theme, which the treatment I'm receiving currently, they said that is somatic OCD kind of / responsibility OCD.
Right, yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, they said it's like a bit of both. And that seems to be the main type for me that always comes back. And even though I've had many different themes, like harm OCD, I had when I was younger, and I found it really, really difficult because I was really young, and it was like, why am I all of a sudden having these horrible thoughts? I couldn't understand them. I didn't know how to articulate them to anyone. Religious OCD was a really bad one for me. I went to a church school.
Okay.
So school became this really horrible triggering environment, because everything was might have just been my experience of a church school, but everything was kind of brought back to religion.
Yes.
And God and heaven and hell were spoke about so openly. Even though I was so young, I had this big exposure to, if you're a bad person, you're going to go to hell, or you're not going to be forgiven by God. And that kind of then triggered an existential thing as well, as like, I didn't ask to be born, and now I have to die. And if I don't live my life a certain way, what happens to me? What is the unit? It kind of triggered. It was like religious OCD and existential OCD kind of came in together.
Yeah. So you've experienced a lot of different themes throughout your childhood. So we back a little bit. So at first they kind of thought that it was just anxiety. At what point did it get to a point that it got that bad that it was like reassessed and they kind of realised it was OCD, or was it something you realised yourself?
So I got diagnosed at 19. So I
Mhm.
first saw a therapist when I was 7. So it took quite a while.
Yeah, and that's very common, isn't it? It takes a long time for people for them to actually realise it's OCD.
Definitely. Yeah. I feel like, especially when you're that young, I think I myself, one, was a little bit nervous to say certain things to
Yeah,
therapists. I don't think I was as transparent as I could have been.
100%. Was that about, like, the more taboo themes maybe that you'd be scared of talking out about? Yeah.
Yeah, it was, I thought there's no way I could sit and say, my mum's had to hide all the knives from me, for
Yeah,
example, as a
yeah.
8-year-old girl.
Mhm.
It felt like I kind of told my mum because it felt like that's my safe person and I trust her,
Yeah,
and she's never gonna think I'm a bad person, but it felt like anyone else that didn't feel safe.
yeah.
So
And how was that, sorry to interrupt, so how was that for your mom, just while we're on the topic of her having to, like, hide the knives and things like that? Um, what was her experience of that?
So my mum, she thought, listening to professionals, she thought, yeah, she has anxiety. It was
Mhm.
quite, it was difficult for her when me and her dad split up.
Yeah.
Um, she's experiencing anxiety. That's what everyone has said.
Mhm.
I also got misdiagnosed as an eating disorder as well because it affected my eating so much.
I think that's quite common, you know. I speak to a lot of people on my page, um, that say they have eating disorders, but I'm not, obviously I'm not one to diagnose anyone, but it seems to me like they actually have OCD around food, which is really, yeah, it's a lot more common, I think, than people realise.
Definitely, because I definitely didn't know about that kind of type of OCD at the beginning
Mhm.
when I was diagnosed, and I was like, "That's how is that OC?" Like I was a bit
Yeah.
blind to it myself, and was like, "No,
Mhm.
but I know it's not an eating disorder, but I don't know how it's OCD," and it was really
Yeah.
conflicted until I started understanding it more myself, and then
Mhm.
I realized, oh, this is actually really common. Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, my mum did find it hard because she thought it was just really bad anxiety.
Mhm.
But I would say to her, please don't tell, my brother and my sister. Like, I didn't want people to know some of the thoughts I was having. So
Yeah.
for her, it was really hard because she was obviously really worried about me.
Mhm.
And then when I got diagnosed and I started to actually really open up about all these thoughts I had, all these things I did,
Mhm.
and my siblings were like, "Oh, like why didn't mum ever tell us?"
Mhm.
I explained to them, I really asked her not to.
Yeah.
Really hard for me at the time. I was only really young.
Yeah.
And I think it was such relief for me and for her to
Mhm.
finally have this open conversation with everyone, and everyone now understands what it is and finally see, oh, okay, that's what all that has been over the years. It kind of makes sense now.
Yeah, like it's all the same thing, just showing up in different ways.
Yeah,
And I can imagine your mom, like, using the example of, like, hiding knives. She probably obviously thought that she was helping you and keeping you safe, which I think a lot of parents do. But ultimately now, like, looking back, you can see that's a compulsion and not helping the whole situation. But obviously parents just want to protect us, don't they? And think, this will help her feel better. Um, but ultimately, unfortunately, it just keeps the cycle going. So yeah, continue on. Sorry, I kind of jumped in there. What was the point that you got to realise that it was actually OCD?
so I think it was following a couple, again, kind of traumatic things that happened, and I started to feel what I thought was just my anxiety kicking in really badly.
Yeah.
um my depression kicking back in, so I'd been diagnosed and had therapy for that as well.
Yeah.
And then I noticed the eating thing happening again, and this was
Mhm.
probably the 6th time in my life that it happened really bad to the point that I
Mhm.
eat again,
Yeah.
lost lots of weight. And then it kind of, for the first time, it went from just food to objects. I thought I was swallowing small objects,
Mhm.
particularly coins. There was something with coins. You couldn't have any coins around me
Mhm.
at all, not even in the house.
Yeah.
Jewelry had to come off.
Mhm.
The rooms had to be cleared. Like my mum had to, as you said, not realizing that was enabling it,
Yeah.
to take everything away off the shelves, magnets off the fridge.
Wow.
I couldn't I had to walk around the house with my hands being held by my
Mhm.
mum or my
Mhm.
brother. my sister, someone in the family holding my
Mhm.
hand, showing me that I haven't picked something up
Uh-huh.
and swallowed it. And then it got to the point that I couldn't even swallow my own saliva. So
Uh-huh.
I had to constantly have tissues with me and would just spit saliva. I had to go to the hospital because I made my throat bleed because it was
Mhm.
raw from where
Yeah.
I swallowed saliva in months.
Wow.
I would only drink certain drinks that I could like see through and see there
Mhm.
was something in it.
There's nothing in it.
And even then I had to drink it in one go because I couldn't put it down. My
Mhm.
soup had to be strained while I was sitting watching it, but then I thought there could be something in the strainer, so
Mm.
I had to keep going and going back and forth with it. I would flip the spoon about 97 times. My brother counted once that I just flipped
Wow.
it forth until I put it in my soup. So when it got that bad,
Mhm.
my mum was really worried and was like, "This isn't anything I've seen before with men."
Yeah.
Um, and from when I was in therapy at 14, she just happened to still have the therapist number because I'd worked with this person since I was 10,
Yeah.
on and off. So my mum just kind of stayed in contact with her, and she messaged her and just said, "I'm really worried. This is what's happening. Haven't seen anything to this extent with her.
Mhm.
There any way you could see her just to see what you think's going on?"
Yeah.
Because obviously completely understanding the NHS is under so much pressure, but I
Mhm.
had an assessment, and they said it can be up to a year after
Mm.
initial assessment. And my mum was just worried that physically as well, with the weight I had lost 3 stone across like 1.5, and she was just worried a year, like I wouldn't be okay. Um, so she contacted the therapist that I'd been seeing on and off before, and we instantly went in and we sat down and we spoke of it. And she said to me, "Oh, what do you know about OCD?" And I was like, "Oh, I know a little bit. Did psychology GCSE, did psychology A level, not obviously like understanding it completely, but we learned about it. So I knew certain things about it, but I said I've never heard of it affecting your eating or make you scared to choke." And she kind of started to explain to me, it's not so much the theme of OCD, although that obviously is a massive part of it and is really hard. It's more the way it presents itself. It can latch on to really anything.
Yeah. Anything at all.
Yeah, and the way I was avoiding things and giving into these compulsions, and without my family realizing, enabling it too,
Mhm.
I had just fed it so much to the point that I just became, completely housebound, couldn't walk around alone. And when I got diagnosed, I was really determined to understand this condition. Like, okay, this almost feels like a relief that now I know I wasn't this terrible person as a kid. I wasn't this evil person that I thought I was. I have nothing to be ashamed of. I can finally kind of take a breath almost for
Yeah.
the first
I
time.
think a lot of people feel that when they kind of like, "Oh, okay." So even though I was gonna say, so we this is what it is, even though we still do that, but then I don't know if you're like this with your OCD, then I just doubt that it's actually OCD at all. So yeah, for a second we kinda have a breath and then we're like, might not even be OCD."
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Always, I'm tricking people,
100%.
we have it, but now someone said it, I'm feeding into that
Yeah,
and tricking them. Or I have, a condition like psychosis or schizophrenia, and
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
diagnosed. And I think when you've been misdiagnosed, it obviously is very
More evidence, isn't it?
yeah, you almost feel like, "Oh, hang on, for nearly 20 years, over
Mhm.
20 years actually, I was just told it's anxiety, it's depression, it's an eating disorder."
Yeah,
They could have easily got it wrong again.
yeah,
Even
100%.
even though on paper it's like that is clearly OCD.
Yeah, you still won't believe it. Like, even
Yeah,
me now, like, talking to you, I haven't experienced, like, those type of themes. So what my OCD in my head is like, you haven't got OCD. Like, what Megan's got is OCD. What you experience isn't OCD. Like, it will take anything and, like, run with it,
yeah. There's
which is
no mercy.
yeah, there is no
Yeah,
mercy at
0,
all.
0.
Um, Yeah, so you went back to this therapist. When you went back to, was it a woman? Sorry, her.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
when you went back to her, did you go back in through the NHS or did you have to go and see her privately?
So I initially saw her through the NHS when I was around 10,
Yeah.
and then she left the NHS and began
Okay.
working privately.
I was gonna say, is that how you got in so quickly?
Yeah,
'Cause
that's how
yeah.
I was very fortunate that she was very understanding of the
Mm.
situation, was very understanding of like our financial situation
Yeah.
wasn't necessarily the best one.
Mhm.
But because I had worked with her for so many years, she was very understanding of that. You know, she allowed time for my family to really come together and help me with being able to pay for this treatment.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Her priority really was just getting me well, which was amazing. And I was very
Mhm.
lucky because I know that without her, I wouldn't have had that experience, and many people haven't.
Yeah.
So that's how I managed to like get seen so quickly.
Yeah, that's
And
really good. 'Cause I know with the NHS, unfortunately, a lot of the time they don't realise it's OCD, as you've kind of said, and the waiting lists can be so long as well. So that's really good that you'd already harnessed that relationship and you could go back to her. So then she told you, okay, this is OCD.
yeah.
Um, and where did you go from there? What like therapy did you start?
So we began ERP for the that was the first time I had ever had ERP. I'd had CBT, like, you know, like talking therapy over the years for my anxiety, but it had never been you know, exposing myself to these things, not being allowed to give into these compulsions. So we began that. It started off very gradual, you know, really easing me in, and it just got harder and harder. And I found it so incredibly hard because it was like I was fighting against myself constantly.
It's
Um,
like everything your brain and body's telling you, you have to do the opposite, don't you, in ERP?
which feels kind of unnatural because
Yeah.
I think anyone, especially someone with OCD, but anyone, you feel like you should listen to your body because if it's telling
Mhm.
you something's dangerous, it must be right.
Mhm.
My brain wouldn't sabotage me like this. That I'm scared of this for a valid reason.
Yeah.
How people get like a gut feeling.
Yeah.
But with OCD, you have that gut feeling 24/7.
All I
So
I say that, like, I say to my partner sometimes, like, I don't I not that I don't have a gut feeling, it's like kind of what you said, we have it all the time, so
yeah,
when our gut feeling's trying to tell us something, we're like, "Is this real or is it OCD?" And at this point, I just kinda like I don't listen to it at all because I don't know if it's real or not.
yeah, yeah, and I think that's why ERP can be really one of the reasons it can be really
Yeah.
challenging because it's like these safety behaviors that I'm convinced have kept me safe and kept my mum safe and
Mhm.
kept all these people safe. All of a sudden, I have to stop, and my
Yeah.
head's like, well, now something's going to happen to you. Something's
Mhm.
gonna happen to your mum. This is going to happen. That is going to happen. The world's going to end, and it's going to
Yeah.
be down to you.
Mhm.
And to sit with that and have to sit there uncomfortably and let that go round in your head and round and round and round is the most horrible thing
Is
ever.
yeah.
So I did find ERP tough. And
Mhm.
at the time I chose to do it without medication.
Mhm.
Um, so it felt like sometimes I didn't even feel like I had the motivation to do
Mhm.
my exposures because I
Yeah.
was also, you know, very having quite bad anxiety and depression.
Mhm.
And I couldn't shower because I was scared of small things in the bathroom and things that are on the bit of the shower where the water comes out. But on top
Yeah.
of that, I was so weak, lost so much weight, and
Mhm.
felt so low that I didn't even have the motivation to, you know, to shower, to brush my teeth.
Yeah.
So it
Do you
just,
think the depression was, 'cause would you sorry, I was thinking in my head at the same time I was talking. Do you think the depression was because of your OCD? Or do you think it was just something you had separately anyway?
um, I think, I think at that time in particular, it was definitely because of my OCD.
Mhm.
Like I said, I had been diagnosed with depression younger and had
Yeah.
like therapy for anxiety and depression together.
Mhm.
But at that moment in time, I felt like my quality of life was just
Yeah.
awful. I had become, you know, homebound, just stuck in my room. If I left my room, I would have to be brought down holding someone's hand.
Yeah.
Um, and it was a lot for my family because
Mhm.
I had to have someone with me 24/7.
Yeah.
The only time they would have, what I saw as, they wouldn't use these words, but what I saw as like a break from me
Mm.
was when they sat with me in bed and I finally fell asleep. And then
Yeah.
I would wake up in the morning and ring my mum straight away.
Mhm.
Oh, I woke up, there's a lump in my throat. I must have been swallowing my saliva in the night. What if I've swallowed something? Uh,
Yeah.
Come up, please. And she'd have to sit in my room with me. So I felt really, really low. One, because of just what I was going through, but two, because I just felt like I am being a burden to
Yeah.
everyone around me. And this isn't fair on my mum. This isn't fair on my brother and my sister-in-law and,
Mhm.
my niece and nephew who are so young and having to see me go through this. My sister,
Mhm.
I felt like I was a big burden at the
Mhm.
time. And, really went through a really, really dark kind of thought process of like, I just shouldn't be here right now.
Yeah.
Not living a good life.
Mhm.
Not living a good life because of me. It would
Mhm.
be easier for everyone. If I just wasn't here right now, it'd be easier for me because I wouldn't be
Mhm.
struggling.
Mhm.
It'd be easier for them because there's no way they're gonna miss this.
Mhm.
There's no way they could miss me right now because I
Yeah.
am just ruining everything. And
Mhm.
it felt like there was literally a cloud over me every day, like
Mhm.
physical weight on my body. Like I just felt so
Yeah.
dragged down, to literally to the floor. Like it was
Mhm.
just, yeah, it was really, I think at that time the depression was definitely fueled by the OCD.
Yeah. Yeah. I can relate to everything you've just said as well. Um, I became depressed also because of exactly what you said, the quality of life that it kind of leaves you with. Um, and you talking about those dark thoughts, I think a lot of people listening will be able to relate. How did you move past those? Was it just continuing with the therapy? Or what would you say was the biggest thing that got you through that?
I think the therapy really helped. And I tried to, it was obviously difficult at the time, but I tried to be quite open about those thoughts.
Mhm.
At first it was just with my therapist because
Mhm.
I had this fear that my family would kind of see it as like attention seeking. You know,
Mhm.
they've never ever made me feel that way, but
Yeah.
I felt like they're just going to see it as like, this is something that she's saying. She's not going to do anything. And I don't know if this is like commonly experienced, but I spoke to my therapist quite openly about it. I think because so many people don't quite understand OCD and because it's a mental health condition, don't know how physical it can be.
Mhm.
I felt like even though I was that ill and you could just take one look at me and see I am very unwell,
Mhm.
felt like I had to do more to really show people I was suffering. So I felt
Yeah.
like I had to hurt myself or,
Mhm.
try and end my life
Yeah.
to see. And because I felt that way, I was like, oh, well, that's you attention seeking. If you're doing
Yeah.
it because you're trying to show people you're suffering, you're attention seeking. So if you say to your mum right now, I think I want to end my life and I've really been thinking about it and
Mhm.
actually feel like I'm stuck in this tunnel vision of this is what I need to do,
Mhm.
going to think you're attention seeking because that's what you're
Mhm.
doing because you're trying to prove to people you just want attention. I kind of beat myself up for those thoughts and then felt like I wanted to do it even more because I was like, what awful person you are to use something so horrible to get attention. You're terrible. And I spoke to my therapist about it and she was very comforting about it and very reassuring about those thoughts and that is your OCD and it really will try and make you feel like this terrible person and this to you. And I think what really helped me was speaking to her and then her telling me to speak to my family because them, speaking to me about it and saying how they couldn't cope if I wasn't here. I didn't believe it at first, but when I started to kind of gradually improve in other ways, I really held on to those thoughts. And I'm lucky enough that I had people around me. I know some people don't. I was lucky enough that at the time I had family there who really tried to make me see it's not gonna be better without you here, and it's not better for us, and it's not better for you. You're not gonna escape this just because you're not here. You're not gonna be living. There's nothing to escape anymore. Like, it was quite, harsh almost saying that to me.
Sometimes we need that though, don't we? I
Yeah,
think with OCD, we need that straight to the point. Because I think we're such opposite to that. We respond better to just straight to the point, quite cutthroat almost. I don't know what the word is, just approach to it from
yeah.
other people.
Yeah, it's definitely, and when people initially have that approach with me, I get so upset and I'm like,
Mhm.
"Why are
Yeah.
you being like this? I can't help it. I'm not deliberately doing this." And then
Mhm.
I feel like I've annoyed everyone and I'm back at thinking, "Oh, I'm a burden."
Yeah.
But then actually it's those, like you said, those kind of cutthroat approaches that I actually hold on to and take. And when I'm, getting better, when I'm kind of going through like that recovery process, it's those things that actually really play in my head over and over, because at the time I was upset, but I kind of needed to hear them because they really made me see reality, like a little bit of reality through that mask of OCD, through that lens that I'm looking through. It almost allowed me to see that glimpse of what's behind it, and actually, what other people are seeing that I'm not seeing this way.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's so hard, isn't it? Because it's like when we have OCD, it's hard to know what is real and what's not. And even like you said, that glimpse of what other people have said that might be cutthroat, even then we'll still doubt that as well, won't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just the doubt will get in any way possible.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so you spoke to your family about these kind of thoughts, and they helped you see, obviously, the world would not be better without you here. And then where did you go from there? So was it just continuing on with the ERP?
Yeah. So I continued ERP for a year and 2 months. I was having
Mhm.
ERP for. It was a
Yeah.
long process,
Yeah.
because it had been completely debilitating. So
Mhm.
it was like I felt like I had to get every part of my life back, not just
Yeah.
realizing I'm not swallowing things,
Mhm.
but leaving the house again,
Mhm.
allowing things to be in the room, learning to almost chew again, learning to swallow my saliva again. It felt like these kind of natural bodily things I couldn't do more. So it was a long process. And then after about a year and 3 months ish, my therapist felt, I had like recovered, because I know obviously you don't necessarily recover from OCD, but I was able to function again the way I was before, and I was able to kind of sit with those thoughts and coexist with them, but let the uncertainty be there, and it didn't stop me living my life at that point anymore. Um, so for me, that was massive, because it was like I haven't only overcome this, this period of OCD, but it feels like 8-year-old me and 6-year-old me and 10-year-old me, 14-year-old me, 16-year-old me. It felt like all those times I got really unwell, I healed all those times too, because I finally, addressed what the problem was. Because even though I wasn't experiencing like harm OCD at that time, for example, also worked on that, just so that, I finally had those exposures to things and would have them there and learn how to cope with these thoughts. And it just, yeah, it felt really big for me at that time. And also for like younger me who didn't know what was going on. And it felt like a massive achievement. That last session I had with her was like, wow, this is big.
And how did it feel then leaving that and going to live life without, obviously I think we always kind of have to practice ERP all the time, but without that kind of person going through it with us, was that scary process?
Yeah, I was really scared, because every kind of week or even twice a week when I was really at my worst, I kind of felt like, okay, I'm going to speak to her tomorrow, or I'm going to speak to her in 3 days. I've just got to get through 3 days. You're going to be in your safe space with your safe person. Um, and then all of a sudden, she wasn't there. Like, I obviously could reach out to her, but it was like I needed to try not to as well for myself.
It's an exposure in and of itself
Yeah.
almost. Yeah.
So it was really scary. Because I guess I felt like at times my family want to protect me. So
Mhm.
maybe they'll lie to me. Maybe they'll tell me
Mhm.
it's okay and this is okay because they want to protect me. But she has no reason to lie. She's a professional. She would be honest with me and tell me if there's something wrong. I've had times where I thought she's lying to me, she's diagnosed me wrong. But generally I felt like healthcare professionals would be a bit more honest, and if they thought I was, a terrible person, a completely different condition, if they actually believed it, they would have to tell me, where family maybe wouldn't want to scare me. So for ages, I was like, "Oh, is this safe? I don't know. I'm not meant to ask my family, but I feel like I have to, but I'm not going to trust their answer." But I don't have just 3 days to wait now because I'm not in therapy. So it was really, really hard. But I just tried to, read through the journals that I kept through ERP, really remember some of the hardest things that I did, keep up with like you said, everything was an exposure, keep up with those exposures.
Mhm.
Um, I tried to almost act like I was still in therapy a bit, like practicing things
Yeah.
myself,
Yeah,
reading.
yeah.
Yeah, so it was hard, but it was really a rewarding feeling to feel like, "Oh, I got through this day and didn't, have to ring her or have to
Yeah.
speak to her." And then, it become a week, and it became a month, and it was like, "Wow, I'm doing this kind of by myself." Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
but yeah, it is very scary, I think,
Mhm.
because all of a sudden that person that's helped you do all these things, had done exposures with you face to face, and you felt maybe safe doing them because they were there. Now, kind of feel like you're on your own.
Yeah, 100%,
Yeah.
yeah. And how did it feel doing exposures alone and without that person there? And what kind of exposures would you that you're happy to talk about, would you do?
Um, so one of the things that I kept up with was coins. When I
Mhm.
left therapy, I, could be around coins in the room. I
Mhm.
didn't just think they were jumping in my mouth and I was swallowing them, but I wouldn't say I was comfortable with having them on me. I didn't
Mhm.
like going out with them. I still was very aware if they were in a room, and I gave in at times to compulsions and would check how many there were.
Mhm.
And one of the things I really did when I left therapy is I was like, okay, the coins is kind of what started it.
Mhm.
It was one of the first objects I latched onto because I worked in a shop at the time while I was doing my A levels.
Mhm.
It was being on the till, I started to get nervous around the coins.
Yeah.
So I realized, okay, coins kind of started the thing with objects. So what you can't afford to do is give in to these compulsions around
Mhm.
coins, because then it becomes something else. Then it becomes
Spirals.
yeah, it just makes everything
Mhm.
so narrow to the point there's nothing left.
Yeah.
So one of the exposures I always try to do is I try to have coins either on me or in my bag. My
Mhm.
therapist gave me a coin to carry around with me. I never took it out of my bag because after
Mhm.
therapy, I was like, okay, I need to take it out of my bag now. I don't want to walk around with it without her.
Mhm.
But I was like, no, I'm going to keep it in there, and
Yeah.
I'm not going to check if it's there. I'm going to take this bag out and go to my friend's house. And I'm going to bring the bag back, and it's going in my wardrobe, and I'm not going to check
Mhm.
if the coin is there because it will be there. And if it's not, it fell out. But then I realized even that is reassuring myself. Even
Yeah.
if it's there, oh, but if it's not, it's fell on the floor, you haven't swallowed it. Even that was
It is. There's
reassuring.
so much sneaky reassurance, isn't there? And it's good that you picked up on that because a lot of the times we can sometimes not pick up on the little sneaky ways the reassurance is getting in.
Definitely, yeah. I think it takes a lot to get to the point where you can say, oh, maybe this, maybe that, maybe it is,
Yeah.
maybe it isn't. It takes a lot to get there.
Mhm.
So I kept up with things like that
Mhm.
just because I felt like if I didn't, I was really worried that it would find its way back in.
Mhm.
Before I know it, I would kind of be where I was.
Yeah.
So I kept up with things like that. I kept leaving the house. Like, I kept up with trying to leave the house as much as I could. I kept up with eating solid food. That was a really big one for me. I was really uncomfortable with the thought of eating solid food without her being there, or without knowing that I kind of had her to talk to if I had a bad time. But I made sure that I didn't let myself go back to like soups, yogurt. I kept eating my solids. I kept trying to eat little things out, like with my family. I'd be like, yeah, I'm gonna get a small dish. So I kept up with things like that. I was just really, really persistent and really harsh on myself. Was like, okay, this can either go one way and you end up how ill you were again, or it could go the other way and you keep pushing. So it wasn't easy, but I kept trying to do exposures like that, keeping up with the things that she taught me to do, because I felt like if I give in a little bit, it's gonna just take.
Yeah. We have that fear as well. I don't know if it is OCD getting in a little bit, but I know I felt the same. That fear of going back to where we were and like not being able to handle it, and not, obviously, like naturally we don't want to be in that place again, do we? Um so yeah, I can totally relate to that. It's like you want to keep up the work because you don't want to slide back, but then also that in and of itself could be a little bit compulsive as well.
Yeah,
So it's trying to like sometimes walk that fine line, isn't it? Of not letting ourselves slip back, but not doing it from a place of OCD fear getting in there a little bit.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a gray area, I think.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. What I wanted to touch on as well a little bit was your religious OCD, if you're happy to
Yeah,
talk about that a little bit, because I get a lot of people messaging me, obviously religious people, who really struggle with religious OCD. Um, and I wondered if you was happy to talk a little bit about your journey with that, because I know it would probably help a lot of people.
definitely, yeah. So, I would say I was around again, started when I was quite young, probably around 8 or 9-ish when I first started having those thoughts. And I went to a church school. I'm Christian myself. Not necessarily, practicing. Like I'm not. But I was christened as a child and went to a church primary school. And it felt like, again, may have just been my experience at my school. It was a lovely school, but it felt like a lot of things were kind of brought back to religion. History lessons brought back to religion. English lessons brought back to religion. It felt like everything was kind of brought back to religion. Praying every morning, every lunch, every time before you go home. You couldn't really avoid it. Um, and I just remember, I don't, remember exactly the onset of it, but I remember all of a sudden, the prayer started to become, I don't quite know the word to use, but it didn't feel enough. The prayer I was saying didn't feel enough. It- yeah, it felt like, our lunchtime prayer was, just like thanking that we have food, keeping us safe during our lunch break. And it kind of started to feel like, oh, but I haven't prayed for my friend who's not well, or oh, but we just prayed for this, but we didn't pray for that.
Uh-huh.
Felt like if I pray for one thing and then leave something else out,
Mhm.
that means I don't care, or it means
Yeah,
something's gonna happen.
yeah.
I started noticing myself, when we had kind of all finished the prayer and the whole class had said amen, I was still going. I was still kind of there with my eyes closed, and you couldn't interrupt me, because if you interrupted me, I would have to start again. Because in my head, God was hearing that prayer directly. Like as I was saying it in my head, it was literally like I almost visualized.
Like the other end of the telephone almost.
Yeah,
Yeah.
literally how I almost visualized it and saw it in my head. Everything I'm saying in my head, he can hear. So if you block me, I have to start all over again because he's not clear now. Then it kind of went to, oh, well, if he can hear my prayers in my head, he can hear every thought I'm having. So I started to like almost mold my thoughts around things that I thought would God would want to hear, and that would make me a good person and would mean I go to heaven. And then that was hard because there was other themes of OCD that were kind of overlapping, like harm OCD at a similar time. So I was like, God's heard that thought. I'm going to hell now. That's it. I'm going to hell. I'm gonna die early. That's gonna be my karma. Something's gonna happen to me. I'll try and pray for forgiveness, and hope that he can forgive that I had that thought and try and convince him. At the time, like in my head, I was like, God's a man. He's listening to me. Like, obviously, they always say him in school as is. I was like, he can hear me. I need to convince him I'm not this terrible person. Um, and I become really fixated on the idea of heaven and hell. What do I need to do to get to heaven? What can I do to make sure my family get to heaven? I didn't want some of us to be in heaven and someone go to hell. I didn't want my mum to smoke in case she went to hell. My brother had a tattoo, was worried that that could mean he would go to hell. I started to pick up on all these things and then become it was weird because it went from using religion as a safety behavior, like a comfort of I need to pray, I need to do this, I need to do that, to being terrified of it. I was terrified to say the word God. You couldn't say the word hell around me. You couldn't say the word heaven. At school, I had got so upset in RE lessons. Anything to do with paranormal type things like devil. Even now, I find saying those words a bit uncomfortable.
Yeah, yeah.
Like the devil, things like possession. I still don't like those words. But things like
I
that.
didn't know you saying them.
Things like that. I became terrified of. Like I could not have said that word up until literally probably last year. Actually, I was
Wow.
and it became that I then got kind of fixated on that side of things of religion, like bad
Right.
spirits, letting bad spirits in.
Mm.
What can I do to keep them out? I had endless mental compulsion, sayings that I would have to say to myself over and over and over, which had those words in, but was saying like no to them because I thought that would
Mhm.
keep them out. So it
So
went,
almost like trying to cancel them
yeah,
out.
it went from praying to keep people safe, wanting God to like me and having all these thoughts, thinking he can hear every thought, thinking I'm being watched at every minute. Like I remember feeling
Mm.
weird like in the shower and stuff because I was like, can God see things
Yeah.
like this?
Mhm.
Like I was only young, so I was like, I don't know if I should feel uncomfortable.
Mhm.
It was weird how it kind of manifested.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then it went to the fixation of bad spirits, bad
Mm.
things, letting bad things in. um, I would be worried that I had like breathed in a bad spirit and I would like have a compulsion of like breathing out like that, like having to breathe all my air out.
Wow.
I was
Breathing out the bad spirit.
bad spirit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it kind of it changed the way religious OCD presented itself for me changed over time.
Mhm. And that's quite common, isn't it, for it to morph? And I think sometimes if like we give so many compulsions to one aspect, it almost then will jump to another one. Or if we do the opposite, where we're like, obviously this is once we know we have OCD, but once we're like, right, I'm not gonna do these compulsions, it will find some other way to try and pull us in.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so with your religious OCD, did that kind of taper off itself, or did you address that during your ERP also?
Um, so at the time, I didn't really feel comfortable expressing these thoughts to my therapist. Similarly,
Mhm.
with like the harm OCD, other thoughts, I just didn't feel safe to tell people. I was worried that, um, at the time, I would never use this language now, but at the time I was worried I was like losing my mind. Like I
Yeah, well, yeah. I think
really,
I felt exactly the same.
yeah,
And a few of the other guests I've had on as well all said they felt that they were going crazy, losing their mind.
yeah.
Yeah.
I felt like I was completely going insane.
Hmm.
I felt like I'm gonna be put in prison.
Yeah.
Be put in like a hospital for mental,
Hmm.
like I'm gonna end up somewhere away
Yeah.
from my family all alone if I tell people these thoughts. So
Hmm.
at the time I didn't have any treatment for those thoughts. The only time they were addressed was when I was the first time they were addressed, sorry, should I say,
Hmm.
was when I was 19 and I was
Hmm.
diagnosed. So at the time it was almost like it tapered off, but it was because the OCD got stuck on something else.
Yeah.
It tormented me for months about that. And
Hmm.
then, um, it found something else. So the
Mhm.
religious kind of OCD tapered off and another type kicked in. And it felt
Yeah.
like my whole life was just that, just one
Mhm.
type tapering off and another type starting
Mhm.
and another
Mhm.
until I finally got diagnosed. And things,
Mhm.
things that I didn't actually recognize were OCD that I now
Yeah.
realize, that harm, obviously religion, but
Mhm.
even things that like sexual orientation,
Mhm.
that you may look back on now and think, oh, at the time I genuinely just weren't sure if I was having these thoughts. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
but then when you look back at your behavior around it,
Mhm.
how obsessive the thoughts were, how you were questioning yourself, compulsions, you realize actually that was my OCD.
Yeah, yeah. I think a lot of people experience that as well, especially looking back on my childhood. Obviously, as your story, you seem to have it obviously more severe during childhood. I had it, I think, more mild to moderate. Like it was never really addressed. It was like I knew, probably not as a child, but as I got a bit older, I knew I was anxious. I knew I was a big worrier. But I just kind of left it at that and didn't share my thoughts, as you kind of said. Um, but now looking back, I'm like, that was definitely OCD that I was experiencing. But I just kind of kept it to myself, didn't tell anyone until it gets to a point where it's obviously completely out of control. And there's no hiding it anymore.
Yeah.
Uh, but a few of the other guests I've spoke to have said exactly the same. They look back now and they're like, wow, that was OCD. But at the time, you always feel like it's just real, don't you? Um, and you think it's just a genuine worry or a genuine concern that you're addressing.
Yeah, especially when it's themes, the harm themes I found incredibly scary.
Uh-huh.
Themes like sexual orientation, I wasn't
Mhm.
scared of those thoughts in the same, like it wasn't like,
Yeah,
oh, these thoughts make me a really bad person.
yeah.
So I didn't, I guess, see it the same way, but it was being diagnosed, looking at all the different types of OCD and
Hmm.
seeing the thoughts I was having around it, the
Yeah.
compulsions, how obsessively I would fixate on it.
Uh-huh.
I realized, no, that was OCD and it just presented itself in that way, and just it didn't necessarily scare you the same way. The constant what ifs, the compulsions, that's what it was. And I think during COVID it was very similar because I was like, well, I'm not technically being irrational here. There's actually this virus. So washing my hands a lot, wanting you to be wiped down doesn't feel irrational. But then you look back and realize actually the extent I was taking it was OCD. It was very much compulsive behavior.
Yeah, I think as well, like the average person who doesn't have OCD can engage in those behaviors, obviously like the hand washing and things like that, and not have an issue with them. But because our brains are like slightly different, they can just easily, even if they are rational, like obviously COVID was here and whatever, they can easily become compulsive, can't they?
Yeah.
And I always think that's something that we have to kind of be careful with. Like the same as, I know I've used this analogy before, but the same as an alcoholic. Like we can go and have one drink and it not be an issue, but they can have a drink and ultimately it could become an issue. And I think that we have to kind of be the same with reassurance seeking things or safety kind of behaviors in making sure they don't become an issue for us.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think
Yeah.
in my most like recent lapse, I
Mhm.
really tried to remind myself of that
Mhm.
giving in to those behaviors even a little bit can
Mhm.
become such an issue so quickly.
Yeah.
And I,
Yeah, we can be like, um, not like the OCD can manipulate us into thinking like, "Oh, that's just small. That's not gonna cause any big problems, I'm not that worried about it. So if I do this, it's not too big of an issue," when really it's all just contributing to the same thing, isn't it?
yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And you mentioned like having a recent relapse. How do you navigate that? Because obviously OCD that's almost the territory it comes with. We can be fine for a while, then have relapses. Now with like everything you've learned and going through ERP, how do you navigate those relapses?
Yeah, so, I had quite a bad, lapse, like, towards the end of last year, and it came on quite suddenly. Like, I felt a bit of anxiety creeping in throughout the year, a couple of things that had happened in my life that I found really difficult to kind of cope with, and I thought, "Okay, it's like me to get anxious around these things and feel this way." But then, I noticed it again started with the lump filling in my throat, struggling to eat. Then before I knew it, I was eating only soup again, straining it, and I couldn't even fathom what had happened. Like, I was like, "Hang on, I know that I have OCD. I know how to deal with it, so how did this happen?" I think I almost felt like knowing I had it, even though I, had elements of it, like COVID, for example, I become quite unwell again, thought that I would never have a full-blown, episode, if that's the wording that you'd use to, become that unwell again. And when it happened, I was really confused because I didn't know how to navigate it. All those things I had learned, I was like, "Where are they? I can't, they're not working. They're not working." But what was different this time is because, the devil I knew it was OCD, and I knew, okay, I need treatment. I
Mm.
need to reach out to someone. Um, I need to be honest with people around me with how bad it's getting. So there's been times in the past where I've been able to use all those tools that I learned. For some reason, this time they just felt harder to find. It felt like it really came back full force. To be honest, was really terrifying. It terrified
It
me.
is. It is. It's petrifying.
Yeah, it really scared me, and because it was probably my longest period of being well, I, began reading so many, recovery stories and decided, "Oh, I really wanna start talking about my OCD and recovery." All of a sudden, I had this lapse, and I was like, "Wow, you're awful." Like, all these people out here talking about their recovery, and they've done so well, and your disappointment, all that
And
work.
we're not at all. And I can relate to that because obviously I've got my page and I talk about it a lot on there. And I think like, if I'm have a bit of a relapse or a bad time, I think like who am I to kind of tell these people what have helped me? But once again, that's OCD trying to manipulate us. And get in. So I can totally relate to that and what you've just said. But you should speak out. Do you have a page or do you
Yeah,
talk about it?
I'm
Ah, I'll follow you. What's the page? You can tell the listener.
Yeah, so it's OCD Unmasked. I love your page, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
And I actually started it because of this lapse. And
Yeah.
one of the reasons I also kind of wanted to start it because of the lapse, but to do with that was I actually started medication for the first time.
Oh, okay. And how did that go for you?
Yeah, so I was terrified. I have a lot of fears around medication, even paracetamol. I can't swallow tablets. I'm scared I'm going to become addicted. I'm scared I've overdosed by accident. I've drunk the whole bottle of paracetamol. I worry about antibiotics. I'm not good with things like that. So the thought of medication that kind of does something to my brain was terrifying to me.
The uncertainty as well, isn't it? Like,
Yeah.
what if it does this to our brain? What if it makes us go crazy? What if I can't deal with the side effects, etc.?
Yeah, all of that.
Yeah.
Literally. All of that. And it got to the point where I did get really unwell again through this lapse. I've lost a lot of weight. Even now, I'm still quite underweight from what I was. I'm still, having treatment now, still on my medication, still doing my exposures and having ERP. But it just got to the point for me where I could see I was getting really unwell, to the point that my family were discussing hospitalization with me because they were like, "We're
Wow.
really worried about
Mhm.
your weight and the physical side of things as well as
Yeah.
how bad it is mentally for you." Again, I got in that dark place. I was
Mhm.
begging my family. I was, saying to them, "Just tell me you're going to be okay without me.
Mm.
It's going to be on my mind otherwise. But if you can just give me that peace and clarity that you're okay, you
Mhm.
let me go and do this right now, and
Mm.
I will feel a bit of peace with it." And obviously, they wouldn't do that.
No.
But it was a really bad lapse and a really hard lapse.
Mhm.
And I just felt like I've never tried medication.
Uh-huh.
Um, I don't want to listen to the things I've read about it, the stigma around it. I want to really just try for myself.
Yeah.
And I owe it to myself to try this new thing.
Give it a go. Yeah. What have you at that point when OCD is like all consuming, there's nothing to lose, is that?
Yeah, exactly. That's what my partner was saying that to me. When I was trying to make the decision, he was saying like, I understand how scared you are. And he was very understanding and supportive. But he said, at this point, it's something you've never tried. Like you said, kind of what is there to lose if it doesn't go well, you come off it or you try something new. You're having a hard time through them first days, that first week, I'll be here for you. We're all gonna be here for you. We're gonna get you through it. It can't be harder, surely, than what you're going through now. Like, surely you at least want to try because this is dreadful seeing you like this. So I kind of felt like, yeah, I owe it to myself to try. And OCD did what it does best. I took it. I instantly was like, am I having a reaction? Can I breathe? Checking my oxygen on an oximeter. Am I going into anaphylactic shock? My throat feels tight. And it went from that because I realized, okay, I haven't had an allergic reaction. Enough time has passed. The OCD kind of
We'll find something else to do with it.
couldn't hold on to it anymore because I was clearly alive and breathing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It was like, oh, I've developed psychosis and
Mm.
or schizophrenia. And the whole first day after my first time taking it,
Mm-hmm.
I laid in a dark, silent room, listening. I could hear things. Can I hear voices? What was that noise? My family were trying to bring me out the room, coming into the room to get me out. I was not listening. I would not have it. I was like, no, this is an OCD. This is real. I feel like I can hear something. My head feels funny. Obviously starting medication can make you feel quite anxious at the beginning. So
Yeah, it can make you feel worse to begin with, kind of. I had that experience as well where you get even more anxious
yeah,
before it kind of levels out.
yeah,
And that I'm sure would then feed that psychosis or schizophrenia or whatever it's kind of telling you. It would then that would be like evidence for those themes as
yeah.
well.
It felt like, I've been taught by my therapist, if it starts with what if, it's OCD. But all of a sudden, this didn't feel what if because I was like, oh, but I actually do feel quite anxious. I actually do feel a bit sick. So I'm not saying, oh, what if I feel anxious? I feel really on edge. So it felt like, oh, it's not OCD because I'm not questioning if I actually feel that on edge. And I refused to take it again the second night. I was like, no, I'm not taking it. Almost like getting angry at my family, like, no, you can't make me take it. They weren't trying to make me, they just were trying to talk to me and calm me down and realize it's okay. But I was like, no, you're not gonna make me take it. I'm not gonna develop psychosis. It's already starting to develop. If I take it again, I'm gonna wake up tomorrow, it's gonna be full blown. And it took hours, and then eventually at like 11:30 at night, I took my next dose. And since then, I've gradually increased my dose, and I'm really thankful and really lucky that actually I've had a really positive experience. Apart from feeling a little bit anxious the first couple of days and letting the OCD, I guess, in those
Yeah, yeah.
days,
Letting it do its thing almost.
letting it, giving it too much power over me those
Mhm.
first few days because of
Yeah.
how weak I felt and how anxious it kind of made me.
Mhm.
But I actually feel like it's been really, really beneficial for me.
That's
And
good.
I've spoke about it, like I said, a bit on my page,
Mhm.
not being pro medication. It's obviously
Mhm.
everyone's choice, but just
Mhm.
being anti stigma about it, like just trying to,
So true.
discuss that. Because I'm not the biggest fan of the comparison. When people say like, "Oh, you wouldn't run on a broken leg," when they compare it
Mhm.
to mental health, I think
Mhm.
it has such great intention. Like I do,
Mhm.
I think it's so real. It has such great intention, and it probably really
Yeah.
helps people compare. But
Mhm.
sometimes it feels a little bit invalidating because you feel like, oh, you need to compare it to a physical
Mm.
injury or
Yeah, I can see that, yeah.
like, not that people say it in that way, but
Yeah.
sometimes you just wish that you could say OCD and not
Mm.
compare it to something physical for people to get how bad it is.
Yeah. Because people don't, do they? And there's still the stigma around that people don't realise how all-consuming
Yeah.
it can be. And I think hearing your story today it's been incredible to hear your story, and that is going to help people realize just how much it can overtake somebody's life. It's not just a little tidiness quirk. Like, that drives me mad. It's not just like keeping things tidy. It can really get in every avenue of our lives, can't it?
Yeah, it can attack everything. And that's what, when I was kind of posting a bit about the medication, I was saying, although I'm not the biggest fan of that example, not because I think people do it with ill intention, just because
Yeah.
it would be great for people to just hear the condition and not need to compare it to like a broken
Mm.
something. But
Yeah.
equally, comparing like my doctor, because I was so scared about medication, she actually used a comparison to me, not that it's the same condition or anything,
Mhm.
but saying, someone with diabetes may need to take insulin. Someone
Mhm.
with high blood pressure may need to take blood pressure medication if they can't control it themselves.
Yeah.
Then right now, your brain is doing something. It's
Mhm.
doing this thing for many years, so it has learned this behavior and it is really hard to stop it. And this medication is going to help that. And
Mhm.
it's the same as other people taking medication for other health conditions. So although I say, it would be great if someone could recognize it, sometimes examples like that do really help. Because for the first time,
Mhm.
I was like, oh, actually, that's really true. If someone
Yeah.
said, oh, I'm diabetic, I need my insulin, I wouldn't say, oh, no, I think you can do this yourself.
Yeah, no, you'd be like, "No, they do need some insulin."
I felt like, well, I'm going to give myself the same grace. Something in my
Yeah.
brain is working differently
Mhm.
to other people's right now without this condition. And
Mhm.
if this is going to help me and it's going to give me the motivation to do my exposures,
Mm.
it's going to make me kind of see the world without this horrible OCD lens of
Yeah.
just gray and everything's terrible.
Mhm.
Why not after, 20
Mhm.
years of being in and out of treatment for different
100%.
things? Why not give it a go? And I'm fortunate and lucky enough that it has actually been a good.
Yeah, and how has it, in what ways has it benefited you? Because obviously there's not medication that can just make OCD disappear. But in what ways have you noticed a difference from your medication?
So, the biggest thing I noticed was I actually felt like I could face my exposures. Not at the beginning, obviously it was
Mm.
gradual. I had to let the medication kind of kick in.
Yeah.
It was getting to the point where I couldn't, I even stopped eating my soup. I was having
Mhm.
like no intake.
Mhm.
I could not bring myself to do it. It just felt too terrifying.
Mhm.
As the medication started to kind of work, I started to go up a bit of a dose. I think one, I beat the OCD a little bit just by taking it, just by showing.
That was an exposure for you to take the medication. And I think a lot of people who are listening, because I get a lot of messages of people, and I can tell by how they've written the message, they're seeking reassurance about whether they should take the medication, whether it's going to give them psychosis or kind of a side effect. And just taking it and trying it, like you, I don't want to tell people you should do this, you should do
Or
that. It's an individual choice. But if they want to, and the only thing that's stopping them is the fear of what's going to happen, then they should do it and just treat it as an exposure in and of itself. And
yeah,
that sounds like what you did.
yeah, that's exactly kind of what it was. The only
Mm.
thing stopping me at that point was the fear.
Yeah.
It felt like the fears I were having weren't like they were OCD fears. Like it felt like I could recognize them as OCD. So
Yeah.
I think that in itself, was a bit of like, and it, like you said, like an exposure, and it kind of
Yeah, 100%.
OCD a bit.
Mhm.
So that in itself made me feel a bit bad. So I was like, wow, that's
Mhm.
massive for me. Someone who's avoided medication their whole life, even
Yeah.
antibiotics and stuff, haven't wanted to take it unless I like desperately need it.
Yeah.
So that was one thing. And then two, when it started to kind of, have an effect,
Mhm.
these challenges didn't feel as scary to me. It was almost like my brain didn't read them the same way. And I think that
Mhm.
was the combination of the medication and the ERP,
Yeah.
because the medication, helped my brain be a bit more silent. It wasn't
Mhm.
as loud. Everything wasn't as loud. These things that I perceived as a threat all of a sudden was a bit like, oh, that's not really so scary.
Mhm.
I think that was a combination of ERP
Yeah.
and medication, because although ERP was great before by itself, and I did get there,
Mhm.
it feels like I've got there. Well, not there yet. I'm not there yet, but it feels like I've reached these milestones a lot
Mhm.
quicker.
Yeah.
I think that's a big push from the medication, because this thing that my brain was lacking, this
Mhm.
thing that, you know, makes people happy and like my brain had none of it.
Yeah, it was gone.
So all of a sudden it was like things don't feel as bad. My head isn't
Mm.
as down. I was able to read a book for the first time since like secondary school and uni. Like obviously
Wow.
I had to do readings for that, but
Yeah.
I haven't read a book for pleasure in years because I had to read the same line over and over
Mm.
before it was quite loud. And I've actually been able to sit and read a book, and it feels like
Mm.
it helped my mind just be a little bit quieter.
Yeah.
And just things like even like social anxiety.
Mhm.
I'm very quiet. I really struggle in social situations. There's not a night where I don't go out where I ring my mum from a toilet crying like,
Mm.
"I need
Oh.
to leave." And I feel like even things like that, just talking to like my family, where I've started seeing some friends again, I feel
Mhm.
like a little bit more like, "Oh, I'm involved in the conversation a bit more." And
Yeah.
um I had a big exposure of going out with my boyfriend and some of his friends.
Mhm.
One of my first times going out, and I'm not drinking while I'm on my medication. I'm not a big
Mhm.
drinker anyway, but when I'm unwell, I choose not to drink.
Yeah.
And I actually noticed that, oh, I was kind of talking a bit and I was involved and I didn't end up in a toilet crying, and I'm not drinking, so it's not alcohol that's made me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I just feel like
You notice these little differences.
yeah, even little differences like that that aren't necessarily to do with my OCD per se, but just my
Mhm.
anxiety and just my nature because of that and being
Mhm.
like that for so many years, it
Yeah.
was, "Oh, wow, I feel like it's kind of helped me function a little bit
Mm.
more." You know, I don't wanna say normally, but it's helped me function
Yeah.
as a person a lot more than I ever really have actually since being, you know, like
Mhm.
6 years of age, really, actually.
Yeah.
So in for those reasons, I'm really thankful that I started it.
Mhm. Yeah, I can relate a lot. When I started medication, to be honest, right at the beginning of I'm not gonna say the beginning of my OCD journey because I'd had it a long time, I didn't know. But once it got really like chronic and severe, I went on it quite quickly. I think probably 3 to 4 months into my onset of it, I started it then. And like you said, it didn't get rid of the OCD, but it made me be able to function a little bit better. So before that, I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, um, I couldn't go about my day to day life, and the medication kind of made that a bit more possible for me. And I think it helps me start the treatment and doing the exposures. It just brings the anxiety down. I think from like a 10 out of 10 to maybe just like an 8, 7, 8 out of 10. And it just makes it a little bit more possible to be able to do these things. Um, so yeah, I can totally understand what you're saying. And that's what I'd say to anyone who's thinking about it. That's how it's kind of helped me, helps you. And if the only reason you're not doing it is because of the worries you have about it, then I don't say encourage because obviously it's a personal choice, but I'd say maybe, go for it if it's only coming from a place of fear.
Definitely, yeah, if it's coming from that place of OCD,
Yeah.
but the OCD thinks it's trying to protect you and, "Oh, I'm trying to."
Yeah.
No, but it's not. And
No.
if, like you said, if that's the only place, not that you're encouraging people, but if it's just from a place of, "Oh, it's my OCD,"
Mhm.
listening to your OCD is never never ever gonna, help because
No, no, no.
it
Ever.
yeah,
There's no exception.
it's just not it's just not helpful. And it's not gonna be helpful. So, yeah,
No.
I feel like it was beneficial, and similarly to you, I've tried to talk about it, not saying to people, "You have to be on medication,
Yeah.
you won't get better without it." You absolutely can, and absolutely,
Yeah.
don't need to be on it,
Mhm.
but if you feel like, "Yeah, this is the choice for me," don't let the stigma around it or what
Mhm.
you've heard about it stop you, because everyone will have their own experience on it. And for me, I
Yeah.
feel like at that time, I feel like it saved my life this time around. I was
Yeah.
really tunnel vision on, I'm gonna end
Mm.
my life at a point, like,
Mhm.
really was set on it. Every day my family were hearing me talking about it. I was getting so ill, and it really felt like this time around it kind of stay
That's
there.
incredible.
And like you
Yeah.
said, it doesn't, it's not a magic cure, but
Yeah.
taking it alongside therapy, I think that's really important, having the two together. It just
Mhm.
brings anxiety down and makes things feel more tolerable and makes it feel like, oh,
Yeah.
well, for this morning, I had a piece of toast for the first time since November with a cup of tea for my breakfast.
Oh, that's incredible.
Yeah, I just got up and just I feel quite hungry.
Mhm.
I asked my mum, if we can kind of make it together and she'll sit with me while I have it.
Mhm.
And it just felt like not, like you said, the anxiety was just that little bit lower. And I think
A little bit more tolerable.
that's where I think it can be beneficial. If
Yeah.
it's a route you're thinking about going down, I think it can help in that way.
Yeah, I agree. Well, Megan, I could sit and talk to you all day. It's been amazing hearing your
Yes,
story.
thank you.
I'd like to end the podcast. I've been doing this recently, with just asking a question. What would you tell if your past self or someone else who is right at the beginning of their OCD journey? What is the maybe one thing you would tell them?
I think so. I would tell them and my younger self, it is going to be okay.
Hmm.
I just think at the time, at the beginning of my journey, being younger, not knowing what it was, I was convinced this will never, ever be okay. When I
Hmm.
lapsed again, I was convinced it will never be okay. I think you get so stuck on this, I'm never going to be like my old
Yeah.
self. You almost grieve a life that you had before your OCD. But I
Hmm.
think it's so important for people to know and to hear, like, it is going to be okay. You're going to get there.
Yeah.
It 100% does get better. It can take time and it can be hard.
Mhm.
But, if it's not over, it's not the end. Sorry,
Yeah.
if it's I worded that
If
wrong.
it, I don't know. I know what you're trying to say.
If it's still bad, it's not over, it's not the end.
Yeah. I knew what you was going at.
It's not over yet.
Mhm.
If it's still not good and things aren't better, then it's still not the end.
Yeah.
You're still gonna get there. I think it's just important to know that it is gonna be okay.
Yeah, and that's amazing advice. And tell everyone again where they can find you.
Yeah, so I started a page recently called OCD Unmasked.
Mhm.
Like unmasking the truth about
Yeah, yeah,
OCD,
yeah.
sharing my journey, I share like a lot of my exposures on there because I'm currently having ERP. I've
Mhm.
been putting some of them on there in like live time because I send them, my therapist asked me to film and take pictures.
Ah,
So
amazing.
I've used some of them to go on Instagram just for people to see what
Mhm.
ERP really looks like. So I feel like some people probably don't understand how tough it really is and some of
Yeah.
the almost bizarre stuff you have to do in
Yeah, the
ERP,
crazy.
like the most abnormal things, so the normal things
Mhm.
find to you again.
Mhm.
So just kind of been trying to do that and just, raise awareness around it because I think you get to a point where you've had it for so long where
Mhm.
you're like, okay, I'm going to try and make something good from this as much as I
Yeah.
can and try and use it for some kind of good.